I really wish that I had recorded this beforehand because I am sick and gross. But hello, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Fi, where we explore the lives of everyday people pursuing financial independence. I'm your host, Megan Combs, and I have some sort of virus, so sorry that my voice sounds gross, but I'm here to say that you do not need $1 million book deal or a famous blog to reach Fi early. And by talking with real humans, I can show you how to forge your own path to financial freedom the everyday way. Today's show is something a little different. Actually, it's completely new and different. It's normally my Megan's Money Musings episode, but I actually am going to be talking to my friend David. If you've been listening for a while, you may remember episode 58, where my co host Mitch and I talked about the fallacy of the quote middle class trap. And during our discussion, we postulated that this sense of feeling trapped may be because there are a ton of new people discovering financial independence, but don't know the tactics of it since many of the original podcasts no longer focus on that bit as much as they used to. Sometimes they'll, have an episode here and there, but I thought I'd introduce some episodes where we dive into more tactical topics, and what better way to start than how to access your money in early retirement, which is what this episode is going to be about. And to help me with this, like I said, I'm going to be talking to my buddy aspiring CFP David Robinson, who has been on the show a few times now. Most recently, when he coached my anonymous friend Jess with her finances. Before we dive in, we're going to have an ad break from advertisers, by the way, that I do not choose and do not condone. So here we go with that. All right, and we're back. Okay, and also before we jump in, I'm going to do a quick disclaimer, and David is going to explain a little bit why we're doing this disclaimer, but let me read that out. The information provided in this episode is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. Any information shared is not intended to be a substitute for personalized, professional financial advice. All investment and financial decisions should be made after consulting with a qualified professional who can assess your individual financial situation and goals. Neither David nor I assume any responsibility for any losses or damages resulting from your reliance on the information provided. Always conduct your own research and seek guidance from a certified financial advisor before making any financial decisions. So, David, tell us why we have that disclaimer.
Yeah, so it's interesting because that disclaimer or something similar to it is on, almost every single financial, podcast and YouTube channel and everything. And I always looked at it as just sort of a, cover your butt type disclaimer so that people didn't get sued. But, I've been learning more and more about this industry and, going into it myself. And now I realize how important it is that people don't take advice from financial podcasts. So this is really good for education and everything like that. But every person's situation is very different, and they should not ever just take advice, especially with like major financial decisions, such as when to retire or how to access their accounts or, things with health insurance. They should not just, take advice from, a podcast or TikTok or YouTube, or my favorite is Reddit. Just to go on a little rant here. Like man, in the fire forums on Reddit, it's so frustrating because you have so many well-intentioned people just giving absolutely god awful advice on Reddit. And they speak very, very authoritatively on things that they're just not that familiar with because they are not financial professionals. And more importantly, they never ask, the poster who posts these questions deeper questions to get a feel for their situation, which is what a financial professional would do. And so, it just breaks my heart when I see people saying like, oh, do I have enough money to retire? And people are like, no, you need to keep working for 5 years. And it's like, you don't know that. You have no idea, like any of their other situation. You don't know what their social security is going to be like in the future. You don't know if they're going to get an inheritance. There's 67 different things that might mean that, they're way past ready to go. And now this person who has posted this question, is continuing to work when they didn't necessarily need to. So it breaks my heart when I see people who are asking for advice on the internet and then not seeking out like professional help. So all of that being said, anything that we say here, like Megan said, I'm an aspiring CFP, so I'm not yet certified and not yet working as a financial advisor. But even if I was,
But
yeah,
but you did pass your test.
yes, yes, yes.
Yay.
Yep,
We'll get to that story in a second. I'll let you
yeah.
finish, but I just wanted to say that congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so but even if I was, and even if I, was doing this professionally right now, you should still not just take, an advice from somebody like me who is not looking at your specific situation, which involves a huge, amount of conversations and questions and things like that. So basically don't listen to anything that we say, but use this as education. And
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
wanted to say, just pile on a little bit. Like, obviously, don't take exactly the advice that we're giving as advice for you, but it is a way for you to have context to share with a professional so you're not going in completely blind. Like, that's the whole point of financial podcasts. Because some people are like, well, what's the point of these if I'm not supposed to take the advice? It's to educate you so that you go into an office of a CFP and aren't just completely blindsided with the information that they're going to give you. And you can ask very smart questions and don't just take what they tell you, because you don't have to do everything they say either. Whatever you think is right should be what you do. So just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, and that's an outstanding point for all the reasons that you just said. Going into it, number one, knowing kind of having more familiarity with what they're going to be talking about, so that when they're talking about it, it's not the first time that you're hearing about it. You're able to like process things, a lot better. But also just so that your time is spent more wisely. If you're just a person coming off the street who doesn't know anything about finances, you're going to be spending, 10 to 40 hours, with a financial professional, like really building out a financial plan. If you can go into it with a lot of knowledge about these different things and maybe like your own sort of like, hey, this is what I was thinking about doing. That way they can just kind of, give you a yay or nay or more specific advice. Especially if you're paying somebody like by the hour, you might be paying anywhere from, $200 to $400 an hour for a financial professional. So that could save you a lot of money. So yeah, absolutely use this as education, learn as much as you can, but still seek out a professional. Especially when you're coming up on major life decisions. And Megan and I were discussing this before the podcast. It's kind of the same as medicine. It's like you should never ever take medical advice from people on the internet, even if they were a doctor, because medicine is kind of like finance. It's like you need to look at your specific situation. And when I say you, I mean a medical professional needs to look at your specific situation to make sure that this medical thing that you're about to do or a drug that you're about to take is right for you. So anyway, yeah, that's all
Yep.
about that disclaimer. Don't do anything that we say, but learn as much as you can. That way you can, make more informed decisions with the guidance of people who, do this for thousands of other people.
Yep. And that was, yeah, thank you for diving into that. Okay, so I want you to tell us the story. Okay, so you just passed your CFP exam like a week and a half ago. Tell the audience what you told me before we started recording about like the cool thing that happened afterwards.
Yeah, so I have really amazing friends. So I live in an area called Warner Robins, Georgia, and we actually have a little fire, not gathering. We have a community of people. We're building up a co-housing neighborhood. So basically, we're all living in our own houses, but we're actually renovating one of the houses so that we can have, community meals and get-togethers and things like that. So that's all still in progress. Right now, we're just kind of like hanging out a lot at our own houses. But Stephen Boyer, who created this co-housing idea, lives down here along with 5 or 6 of our other fire friends that live down here. He called me, after I texted him saying, "Hey, I passed the exam." And he said, "Hey man, you want to get some lunch?" And I said, "Oh, I already had lunch there's a halfway point for the exam where I took a lunch break." I said, "Oh, I already had lunch, but thank you." And he's like, "No, come out. We'll have a second lunch." And I said, "Oh, okay, whatever." So I showed up to this pizza place that he told me to come to, and my neighborhood, there was 6 of us there. It was just really really sweet. He kind of gave me a little surprise party in celebration. So it was just really nice. It was a really nice thought, and it just felt so good. And I just feel very lucky to have this community of people around me. So thank you, Stephen, and thank you everybody else that came out and just made me feel really amazing about myself.
Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to share that because first of all, I think Warner Robins, the community still, is it Warner, oh, sorry, is it Warner Robins or Warner Robinson?
I wish it was Warner Robinson, and every
Because
time
that's your
I
last name,
yeah,
right?
it's funny. Every time I write Warner Robins, like on a address thing or whatever, I write Warner Robinson. I'm like, shoot, and I have to cross it out.
Yeah. Cross
Yeah,
it
it's
out.
just
Yeah. Okay.
Warner.
So it is Warner Robins. Okay.
Yes, yes.
So I think there's still homes for sale, right? Or at least for rent. So there's like if you are wanting to be part of a FI community and this is what you've been looking for, and you're like, oh my god, I want to be a part of that, and you're in a spot to move somewhere that's relatively cheap, I can put that link in the show notes, and yeah, you can move down there and hang out with Steven and David and everybody else who lives down there. So
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
we have buried the lead way too long. We've been going for 10 minutes without talking about how to access your money in early retirement. So this is for people who are like, okay, so I've been saving in my pre-tax accounts. I have my money in my house and now I am FI, but I can't access my money. How am I supposed to do that? I'm trapped, quote unquote. How can I access my money? So there's actually a lot of different ways to do this, but we're really only going to talk about four. And then we're going to link in the show notes the IRS's. They have an article on several different ways to do this, which I'm like, the IRS is like telling you how to do this, which is kind of cool. So I guess they're not really telling you. They're kind of telling you, like, hey, here's how not to like pay penalties and stuff. But we are going to talk about the Roth ladder, 72T, rule of 55, and then just the, straight up 10% withdrawal penalty that you could take if you just take out the money. So, yeah, let's dive into the Roth ladder. And David, can you talk about what this is?
Absolutely. So the way that this works is this. So let's kind of define, and some of this you guys may already know, but we'll talk about traditional IRAs versus Roth IRAs. So when you have a traditional IRA, you put the money in every year and you get a tax deduction on that. So as an example, if you made 50K and you put 7 grand into your traditional IRA, you're only paying taxes on 43K. The government does that to incentivize you because they want you to save for retirement and everything like that. While the money's inside the account, it grows, 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 tax free. You don't have to pay money taxes on dividends or capital gains while it's inside the account. Then when you take it out later on in life, basically you're going to pay, ordinary income taxes on that, whatever your total income is for the year. So it's a great deal. You get tax deduction while you're working, and potentially when you're in your highest earning income years, you get to, keep that money on your side of the ledger. But then, of course, the IRS wants their cut. However, the IRS created a new type of account called a Roth account back in probably the late 1990s. And that works in the reverse. That basically says, hey, instead of taking a tax deduction now, you'll put it in, no tax deduction this year. It'll grow, grow, grow tax free. And then when you pull it out, assuming that you follow the rules, which we'll talk about, it's going to be totally tax free. So this is super duper powerful, right? Especially if you're a person who's not in a very high tax bracket. I'm thinking especially of like military people who only a portion of their pay is taxable. A lot of them are paying, a lot of lower income people are paying 0% in federal taxes just because, they just don't make a lot, or maybe they have kids and they get all that money back. And so they're kind of a perfect candidate for, hey, I'm not getting a tax deduction, but I wasn't going to pay taxes anyway. So this is a great deal for me. Another way to get money into that Roth account is this. You can do what's called a Roth conversion. And this is where the Roth conversion ladder kind of comes into play. So the way that this works is this. You've got a bunch of money in your traditional IRA, and let's say that you decide to convert $50,000 from traditional to Roth. You are going to pay taxes on that $50,000 conversion, right? Just like any other income, the IRS is going to, look at that and say, hey, based on how much you made with your salary and, any interest that you made plus this big $50,000 conversion, that's going to add to your total taxable income. So you're going to pay taxes on that. But once it is converted over, hey, that money is tax free forever. However, what they don't want people to do is convert it and then start withdrawing that money the very next year, right? Because people would just abuse the system. So what they do is they put a 5-year wait on that. It's one of the many, or one of the several 5-year rules that the IRS has on these accounts. So here's what that looks like. You make that conversion of $50,000. 5 years later, you can pull out that conversion amount tax and penalty free. You avoid the normal 10% early withdrawal tax that you normally have to pay if you don't wait until age 59 and a half to access that money. So again, if you follow the rules, you make that conversion to 50,000, wait 5 years, you can pull out that 50,000 amount tax and penalty free. Now, you might have converted over 50,000 that has subsequently grown with the stock market to say 60,000. Well, you can't pull out the whole 60,000. You're going to pay taxes and penalties on that, extra 10,000 that we talked about. It's just the conversion amount itself. So,
Thank you for saying that because I just learned this. I have known about the Roth conversion ladder for years, and I just learned that you can only take out the converted amount. You can't take out the growth. And I was like, oh, I did not know that. I thought it was just whatever is converted plus the growth you can take out. I don't know why I didn't realize that, but I think it was Tanya in our RTP WhatsApp group was talking about it. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. So thank you for saying that because I don't know why I didn't know that, but I didn't.
yeah, I mean, like logically, you would think, like if that 50,000 represented, 1,000 shares of, VTI or something like that, you would think, hey, it's the same 1,000 shares of VTI, but the IRS doesn't look at it as shares of a security that you own. They look at it as just pure dollar amount. So, and even if, maybe you made that Roth conversion 15 years ago, and that money is, money has a much different value today than it did 15 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's just a pure nominal dollar amount. So,
So I have a few questions.
mhm.
So with if it does grow like that, the amount that it's growing, I guess, is that just you're gonna reserve it for your normal retirement age, and that's just your normal retirement bucket, and you can kinda think of it that way?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh,
If you get
that's
to the
awesome.
point, yeah, if you get to a point where, you have utilized, and we'll actually talk about Roth contributions as well, which is another way you can get money out. But if you got to the point where you're in early retirement and you've just used up all of the penalty free dollars that you can, at that point, yeah, you would have to withdraw that money and pay a 10% penalty. And we'll double check. I'm almost certain that you would not pay taxes on that because you've already paid the tax when you made the conversion, but you would pay the 10% penalty. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a quick rating. Also, hit up my Patreon at patreon.com/everyday5podcast for ad-free and bonus content coming in 2026. I'm Megan Combs, and I'll see you next time on Everyday 5.